Earlier in this course, we set up Ansible so that we could SSH into all of our remote clients and become root without needing any passwords along the way. We set up SSH keys, and then we set up sudo so that we could become root and never be prompted for a password. But Ansible includes a tool called Vault that allows you to encrypt playbooks and password protect them, so that if you don't want to do the passwordless sudo, or it's for some reason you think this is a better way you can go about doing it, it's still not like the perfect end-all solution, because either you need to store a password in a file or you need to manually type it. However, we're going to look at how to do it, because it is neat to be able to encrypt your playbooks, because if nothing else, it keeps them private. So that's actually what we're going to do. We're going to encrypt the entire playbook. Because what Ansible Vault does is it just kind of like, well, it does that. It encrypts it just into text. It doesn't become a binary file or anything. But we encrypt the entire playbook, and then if we want to edit it, we decrypt it. If we want to run it with Ansible Playbook, we need to either provide it the password in a text file or type it in manually, on the command line. But it just uses standard Ansible commands inside the playbook. The only thing is the encryption that happens on top of that. So let's look at it. It's really easy to do, and it's kind of neat, even if you don't use it as your source of security for sudo. Now, we already have these computers set up with passwordless escalation using sudo. That's how we've been doing Ansible playbooks all along. However, this computer, the actual workstation we're on, it doesn't have that set up. So if we type sudo ls, it's going to prompt us for our password, which is what we want. We don't want to be able to just automatically do it. So we're going to demonstrate how you would use Ansible Vault using our local host rather than the computers that we've been working with this entire course. I'm just going to hit cancel. It is over here, actually. That is the password. $$ W0RD. That is our password to escalate sudo. However, we're going to do this using Ansible Vault. Okay, so Ansible Vault will encrypt the entire playbook. To get started, we're just going to say Ansible Vault create, and then I'm going to say test.yaml, like I always name it. Okay, so say that. It's going to ask us what is the Vault password. Now, this is different than the sudo password, because the Vault password is how it's encrypting our actual YAML file. I'm just going to say let me in. Let me in. It's easy to remember, easy to type. And now we're inside this temporary file. Notice down here it's temp and then just some random thing over here. Once we save this, Ansible Vault is going to encrypt it and store it as test.yaml. But we're going to create this just like a regular playbook, because that's what it is. So we'll say insert, and you're going to notice one thing. Because the way that it's using a temporary file, VI does not know that this is a YAML file. So we are not going to get the fancy syntax highlighting that we've been getting this entire course. So we're just going to have to be really careful that we spell things correctly. All right, so dash hosts, and I'm just going to say localhost, because again, these already have sudo set up for no password. So we're just going to use localhost, and this computer requires the sudo password in order to escalate privilege. We want to say become yes, so that it does escalate privilege. Vars, this is where we're going to add a variable, and the variable has to be Ansible underscore sudo underscore pass. And we want to set this to the value for the sudo password, which is the user password, and that is capital PA $W0RD. Now, you could do this in an unencrypted YAML file, but you don't want to like store the user's password in an unencrypted file. So while this is something we're using, or we're doing with Ansible Vault, you could technically put this variable in any playbook that's not encrypted, and it would work. Instead of setting up sudo for passwordless stuff, you could just put the password right in this variable as you do. But the only reason we're doing this now is because it's going to be encrypted. All right, so let's make a quick task. We're going to install Apache because that requires privilege escalation. Now, this is an Ubuntu machine, so we're going to use apt to do this. But what's going to happen is this is going to escalate privilege. Again, become is yes, and it's going to already know the Ansible sudo pass because we've set that variable. So we should not need to enter the sudo pass in order to get this installed. However, because it's encrypted, let's save this file. Because it's encrypted, we're still going to have to somehow decrypt it, because if you look, test.yaml is this big encrypted file. The first line tells it that yes, it is an Ansible Vault file. It uses AES 256 encryption, but it's encrypted. We can't tell what this is unless we use Ansible to edit it, right? So if we tried to just execute it, Ansible playbook test.yaml, it's going to complain and say, I can't decrypt this. You haven't given me any key. And there's a couple different ways that we can give it that decryption password. We can do it right on the command line. So I'm going to push up and then -- ask vault pass. And then when we press enter, it's going to ask us for the vault password, which, remember, is not the same as a sudo password. It's just that let me in that we created when we originally created the file up here with Ansible Vault. So I'm going to press enter, and now it decrypts it, and it runs exactly like a standard playbook would run, because once it's decrypted, that's what it is. And you'll notice it doesn't ask us for a sudo pass because we set that variable inside the playbook. So that's actually prompting us on the command line how to, so that it asks us for it, but it's still interactive, right? I mean, if we did this, we could have just entered the sudo password rather than, encrypting it or whatever. So this doesn't really save a lot of time. It does give you more security because your entire playbook is encrypted, but if you want to do this without any user interaction, right, you don't have to type the password, you can create a file, so just a standard file using VI. We're going to call it password.txt. And inside here, just put the plain text password. Let me in. And this is where the danger is, right? We don't want to have a password in plain text. But that's kind of the compromise. You have to decide what sort of compromises you want to make. If you want to store it so that there's no interaction, you have to be able to have that password for decrypting the file somewhere. Now we could do chmod 400 password.txt, and if we do ls-l, you'll see now it's only visible. This password.txt file is only readable and only by the owner, so nobody else on the system is going to be able to look at it. So you at the very least want to do that type of security on your password file that's in there. But in order to feed that into Ansible Playbook, it's just like doing the one where it prompts us. It's just a little bit different. We'll say, I'll push up until we get back to here. So instead of ask vault pass, now -- vault password file, and then specify the name of the file, which is password.txt. All right, and since we are executing Ansible Playbook as our user has read access to that file. So now this should execute just fine without prompting us for anything. We press enter. It's going to get the password, decrypt the file, and then execute it. And now it doesn't look like much happened. Well, that's because up here we installed Apache. Here, Apache's already installed, so it doesn't have anything to do. But it still didn't prompt us for that sudo password, and it also didn't prompt us for the vault password because we fed it that with that password file. However, remember that password file is not encrypted. I mean, we can just look at it. It's plain text. Boom, let me in is the password. So you still have to be careful how you manage it. The nice thing is Ansible Vault gives you one more way to protect your data, and you can protect entire playbooks. If you want to edit that file, remember it's completely encrypted, right? We can't edit it like this, but you can use Ansible Vault to edit a file as well. So Ansible Vault edit test.yaml. It's going to ask me for the password. Let me in. And then it's going to open it up in VI so that sure enough we can edit it just like before. Again, no syntax highlighting. That's just a little annoyance because remember it doesn't have an extension in the temp folder, so VI doesn't have any way of knowing that this is supposed to be a YAML file. But nonetheless, we can edit it and change it and save it like normal, and then it will make sure it's an encrypted file. And really, that's all there is to using Ansible Vault. It does do actual encryption, which is nice because, again, the entire playbook is encrypted. Rather than just protecting a password, you're protecting that entire playbook. But the only thing it does is, encrypt and decrypt. It doesn't really magically store passwords. If you want to do it without user interaction, you still need to store your password somewhere to feed it into Ansible Vault so it can decrypt it and then execute your playbook like normal. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.